Whoa, whoa. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Babylon, you speak about peace, yet you make more words. Suppress the innocent to deceive the poor. Take on destruction, hungry baby mother breast and dry. Yet you plan more woes in your private sessions. Babylon, you do. Doom, doom, doom. Babylon, you fail. Yes, you fell. Babylon, you do. Doom, doom, doom. Babylon, you fail. Yes, you fell. Building more bombs and guns, yet the babies are dying from hunger. We are the victims of your oppression. Blood of the innocent that you slaughtered is upon your hands. You gave the guns, you set the fight, and you sit aside and watch the slaughter. Babylon, you do. Doom, doom, doom. Babylon, you fail. Yes, you fail. Babylon, you do. Your writings up on the wall now. Babylon, you fail. Yes, you fail. Fire burn down road.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to be in your company each and every Sunday from around that time, around the 6 o'clock hour. Let me welcome you right here to that space on social media, that is the Civic Vibe space. As I said, each and every Sunday from the 6 o'clock hour. We are here, and we're glad that you guys are here with us, as always, for a very, very interesting and informative program. This evening being the 5th evening of March 2023, and it is already 5 minutes past the good hour of 6 o'clock, and that is where we have to make a start in the interest of time here this afternoon. But before I make that start, before I move across to Brother Alvin Thomas and our special invited guest in the name of Dr. Irvin Pascal, let me just say a hi and hello to the sick and shorting out there, those of you who are sick in terms of your body, those of you with some, whatever it is out there, problem-wise that is, we hope and pray that things will work out for you, okay, as this week proceeds on. Let me touch Carol and Ford. You are there with us. Brother Alvin Thomas, well, you are there on the live feed as well. Brian Francis, you're also there. Carol Anniversary Bruni, that is, you're there. Austri Lynn, Ivinia Joseph, Justina James, Lucinda McDowell Thole, Marlene Shillingford, Dorian Dorival, let me see if I can get Mali Austri, David Joseph, Maury Jules, my brother Pat Corbett up there in the North area, Clarolyn Warrington, Jefferson Winston, June Bernard James, you are looking on as well. Dei Jojo, Olivia Esprit, you are there as well. My brother Cyrus Raphael, you guys are there with us already. So I want to ask you guys before we, take flight in earnest here. The discussion that we're about to have here, please don't be selfish about it. Let others know that that discussion is on. And one of the ways that you can do that is by sharing that live feed to your friends and contact at this time so that they too can be part and parcel of the conversation here as we are moving on. So folks, as I said, it's a very interesting program, two very interesting topics to be discussed this afternoon. One, firstly, by our brother here, Dr. Irvin Pascal. But before I move across to Irvin Pascal for him to give you guys his opening remarks, let me move across to Brother Alvin Thomas, the host of the program, so that he can say hi and hello and greetings to you guys out there. Alvin, good evening.
Yes, thank you, Lofty. Thank you. A pleasant good afternoon again to all our many fans who have logged in and those on the various social media platforms at home and abroad, saying a pleasant good afternoon, a pleasant Sunday good afternoon to you. And to my good friend, IP. Good to see you, brother. We go way back. And it's always a pleasure to be in company of good old friends like that. Let me also just take the opportunity on behalf of Civic Vibes to extend condolences to the family of Mrs. Eudora Shaw, who passed away this week. Mrs. Shaw is the wife of the late deceased former Secretary to the Cabinet, Vernon Shaw. They both were public officers for many years in the public service of long standing. Mrs. Shaw being a permanent secretary in several ministries. So I extend condolences to my good friend, her son, Bobby Shaw, and Verlie Joseph, Mickey's Joseph wife, and all the other families of Mrs. Shaw. So it's a pleasure to be here. We're going to have another very interesting conversation, I'm sure, discussion. So I look forward to it. And just to say hi to Paula Celestine, Paula. We miss you, Paula. Paula, we miss you. Paula, you need to get back on track. Paula, please. Anyhow, look forward to the rest of the show.
All right, Alvin, thank you very much, my brother, for your opening salvo, as it were. I had some time with Paula today. We were at an event, and so Paula is there, and she will be back with us pretty soon. But other commitments at this time take precedence where Paula is concerned. But she's there with us in heart, in spirit, and so we wish her well wherever she is at this time. Folks, the program that you're listening and viewing at this time, it is streamed via Facebook and also on YouTube as well. I just need to put that out there, so that you guys can see and hear what is happening on these two social media platforms at this time, good old Facebook and good old YouTube. We have two telephone numbers attached to the program as well. I'll be plugging it in the chat sometimes later, so that you can call into the program just in case you want to share your comments live here on the feed. All right, folks. Without further ado, let me move across to Brother Irvin Pascal, Dr. Irvin Pascal, that is. It's going to expound on a very interesting topic here with us here this evening, entitled Carnival and Our Health, the Need to Reform. We know lately that word reform is like a buzzword in Dominica, but Dr. IP is going to, tweak it up a bit in terms of our carnival celebrations as we know it. And he being a doctor, medical doctor, that is, health is a very passionate topic where he's concerned. So, Brother Pascal, good evening to you, sir, and welcome to the space of Civic Vibes.
Greetings, Lofty, to you and Alvin. First, I'd like to say thank you for, allowing me to share, as usual, whatever little knowledge and information I have with you all and the listening public, especially the Dominicans at home and abroad. Like Alvin, I'd like to extend my deep condolences to the family of Mrs. Shaw. She was, I call her elder right now. I'd have to say she's a grandsister. She's recently passed, and I hope the ancestors receive her with open arms. And as I say, thanks again for allowing me to honor my ancestors. That's what I think I do with my contributions in these public forums. For this afternoon, I'd just like to add that I like to make it clear, my disclaimer is that I don't have the last word on anything I say. I'm no expert on most of the things I say, maybe in ENT. And so I don't want anybody to think that I am here being a specialist or being on anything I say. I don't have the last word. Most of what I say is from what I pick up from what other people have said. And I just hope my perspectives will be constructive and contribute to our continued struggle or fight, if you want, for freedom and liberty. who live in on this piece of rock as equal citizens, as equal human beings to each and everybody else. Thank you. And you can call me IP. I prefer IP than you normally call me IP Lofty to song in a little bit. Hearing you say Irvin Pascal, there was a little bit. If you say Doc or IP, that sounded, All right.
All right, my brother. All right. All right.
You wonder who you're referring to?
Yeah, I know. Honestly, I was like, coming from Lofty, it was sung in a little bit.
All right, Doc. All right, Doc. No problem.
Yes.
No problem. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, let us get things going here. Again, it's a pleasure to have Dr. IP in our audience here this afternoon.
Lofty, let me just make a quick note. I see on the feed somebody said they're listening all the way in France.
Well, that's a lot. That's the power of technology.
France. So that's a commitment that somebody take the time off. Veronica Thomas it is, and up in France, bear in mind the time change, and listening to the program.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, Veronica, thank you very much for being here with us. We hope that you get something out of the conversation this afternoon. All right, Dr. IP, let us get the ball rolling here. The topic on the scrutiny this afternoon, it is Carnival and our health, brother. Right. What are some of your initial comments based on that topic as we, we'll dive a bit later into more hard stuff, as it were.
Okay, let's put it that way. We've just had Carnival. Mm-hmm. Carnival was in Black History Month. Then we've had lots of comments after the Carnival. And I was particularly involved or approached because one of the main comments had to do with concerns about the health of our heirs after Carnival, in the sense that in relation to the loud music, or what some people perceive to be the excessive decibels or the excessive loudness of the music coming from the trucks, and to what extent that may have some health implications for the young people who were the most exposed to it. So it was that health concern that got me involved in looking at Carnival and our health. As an ENT specialist, also there were other health issues that were raised in the terms of people drinking excessively, the smoking of cannabis and cigarettes in public, in people's faces, the implications of that, the health implications of that, the commentary on what I would call it, the size of our people now, both male and female, in terms of the obesity that was displayed quite, what I would say, without reservation during the Carnival. But really and truly, what got me thinking about it, instead of looking at just in my small area of ENT and the consequences for individuals exposed to loud noise, and even for the implications for me having to treat and manage those patients, is the fact that we have to remind ourselves that health is not only physical. Health is not only your physical well-being, it's your mental, your spiritual, and your social well-being. And so the loud noise, for example, is not only a physical impact it may have on an individual, it may have a psychological, a mental impact on somebody else who's maybe trying to sleep, who's trying to rest, or who's been exposed to a loud noise for the last 2 weeks as there were activities leading up to the jump up on those 2 days. But what the perspective I would like to demonstrate is to say that if you look at it, it's what is carnival and why we have carnival to have those issues being of concerns during carnival. I think if we go back a little bit in the history, we will accept that the reason we have carnival is because in the Judeo-Christian, whatever ethic that we have embraced, that there is something called Lent coming. And the history of the carnival in relation to that, our Christian faith, our Christian practices, is that because Lent is coming and it's going to be a time where you're going to have to abstain from what we would call pleasurable activities, things that brought us joy, where now it's a bit of a fasting from alcohol, from revelry, from pork, from meat, because that's what the original translation of the word carnival came from. Carnival came from, I think it's Latin or one of these things that mean staying away from the flesh. But that is also extended. So what in the history of how we came to be participating in carnival, especially during and maybe early after slavery, part of that has to do with the practice of Christianity. Now, to focus only on what happens on those 2 days, not realizing that those 2 days were actually created for those excesses. So we might be missing the boat if we're not realizing what those 2 days are doing is highlighting to us our normal daily practices that are injurious to our health, that we sort of put on blast or put on steroids on Carnival Monday and Tuesday. So it's not the Monday and Tuesday that's the issue. It's how we lived our lives from a health perspective before Carnival Monday and Tuesday, because we will accept that most of what we were concerned about, those were practices we always had. But because we practice this Christian faith that says Lent is coming, so we give you 2 days. So if that's the only way we're looking at carnival and not at its other aspects, it's resistance to changing our identities. It's part in our returning to nature and freedom and all of that. That's not the aspect of carnival we concentrate on. We don't even concentrate really on the commercial aspect of a festival like carnival. The main reason why we have carnival is because we're going to have to abstain for a month from some human activities that are thought to be about pleasure and satisfaction and that type of thing. So for me, it is not those excesses in carnival that is the health issue. There might be a health issue for that short day, but there's hardly any amount of noise you can get on carnival day. You would have to be right under the speaker for 8 hours nonstop for that loud noise to affect your hearing or destroy your hearing. And you would have to then also, after the Carnival Monday and Tuesday, continue to be exposed to excessive noise when you want to sleep at night. You would have to be exposed to excessive noise if you're using a chainsaw, excessive noise or loud noise in your stereo for it to have an effect on you. So I'm saying the carnival, actually, looking at it another way, actually is a warning sign. It rings a bell. It's like a warning. It's like an alert that those activities, it's not about the carnival, it's about how we normally live. So for example, during that, there were lots of concerns about people smoking. And that behavior is being frowned upon. People smoking cannabis in the public, that's being frowned upon. Loud noise being frowned upon. So what we're talking about is changes in our behavior that have impact on our health. Or even if you take about, even if the so-called concern about the nudity and the what I don't want to be, I mean, nailed against the cross, but the fact that the nudity was a lot of nakedness, was a lot of obesity in both men and women. And so the obesity is an issue for us when it comes to health. So those people didn't get obese on Carnival Monday and Tuesday. They've been obese all year. So I'm looking at saying, well, the carnival is being criticized, but it's a good thing it happened because it's highlighting things that we should be addressing on a constant basis. Because if we go back to my area of expertise, we have a Noise Reduction Act that's not enforced. That affects people's health, not only their air health, it affects their sleep, it affects their state of mind, and all those eventually can have secondary effects on their health. So we also have obesity that's there all the time, that we're not doing much about it. You don't hear that much about it. You don't hear everybody complaining about it every day, because it is what's going to send up our health bill in 5 to 10 years. When not all, the majority of these people who may be obese, if they don't do anything about it now, they most likely will end up being hypertensive and diabetics in their 30s. They don't have jobs. We don't have the infrastructure to take care of them. What's going to happen to them? They're going to end up on dialysis. So I am saying that that's why I said I wanted to look at it differently. I'm saying we should welcome the fact that Carnival highlighted these abnormalities vis-a-vis our health, things that we should be addressing. And it's not only when we put them on blast on Carnival because we know we're not going to have them during Lent, then you get a critique, to me, an unfair critique of what the Carnival Festival is supposed to be doing for us. Yeah, I don't know if you follow my trend.
Yeah, we're following up.
So really and truly, my relation to it is that the issue of Carnival and health is about people's behaviors. And behavior change is the key to most of the chronic diseases that we have. What we eat, what we listen to, what we drink, whether we exercise or not, and whether, most of all, mentally, what we do for ourselves, what we think for ourselves. So it's that behavior change that I'm saying it's part of the flavor of the month, the reform. So it's not only the reform in the politics.
Yeah.
It's the reform in how we think, which is going to involve the reform in the politics. And that extends to our health as well. And why I say that is because what we know in health is that if you're seeking to convince individuals to practice healthy behaviors, which is what was being critiqued during the Carnival, and you do that without addressing the broader socio-political, cultural issues and economic issues, which may hinder that behavior change, then your attempt to change behavior is going to be fruitless. And it can be classified as being dishonest and cruel, because what you will be focusing on, especially from a health perspective, is to change people, is asking people to change their behaviors without realizing that, but they've been behaving like that all the time. What is the social factors that contribute to that behavior? What are the economic factors that contributed to that behavior? What are the political and cultural practices that contributed to that behavior? So I'm saying it's not about separating them, it's to understand, because if you don't address those other factors, so it's all right to come and criticize the loud playing of music or the smoking of cannabis in public, or the obesity in people, that's fine. Anybody can criticize. But what about those other factors that preceded the Carnival that were responsible for getting us in that state where we all worked up and frenzied about it. And something else I'd like to say from the discussion point of view is that what I'd like us to take another look at it and reform how we look at these things is that you never hear, or I have never heard anyone, and I stand to be corrected, inviting the views of those people who we claim are being affected. I've never heard after Carnival or any of these things where you hear them interviewing a young person who might have been standing close to the speaker and lost their hearing, or a young person who was smoking weed, or an obese lady that maybe had too much of herself exposed. We never hear their voices. We never hear how they feel about what they're doing. So what I'm saying is that what we're doing is deciding that for us, those behaviors are not acceptable without going beyond that, going beyond the veil of the behavior. And which is all of that we need to be reformed, because it's the same thing that happens in our political processes. We only hear one set of people saying, this is how Dominica should be, this is how we should behave, this is what we should have. Whereas the people who's going to affect the most, you hardly hear them, you hardly hear their views. So that is why I think there is, we need a reform, not just in the political arena. And I might add as well, without any fear, that all those things that we're concerned about in health, we have, or the country, or the citizens of this country have given people responsibilities or given authorities to different individuals to fix those things. But what I realize is that those individuals are not succeeded in fixing those things. So the authorities that's supposed to make sure we don't have that kind of problem on Carnival Monday and Tuesday. And Carnival Monday and Tuesday is not just only a time to have as much excessive poor behavior or behavior that can impact your health. And it's more than that. It's an economic activity. It's a time to look into your past, to see how things happen. It's a time to critique the system under which you live and all of that. They're not facilitating that. So I'm saying that's the reason why maybe the electoral reform is important, so that you can put people there who will address the thing. But if you have no electoral reform, I don't see I don't see it's going to be much more difficult to put authorities in place who can prevent and who can take the preemptive steps in our daily lives, so we don't end up having to be complaining after every carnival about the loud noise and who doing that and that kind of thing. That's just my take.
Yeah, your take.
I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, and Doc, yes, thank you for your take and laying down that sort of solid foundation on which we can build the conversation as we are moving along. Just before I pull in Alvin into the conversation though, based on what I gathered from you, some of what I gathered from you is that you're saying that what we see on show, quote unquote, on these 2 days of revelry, as it were, sometimes some persons basically look at these 2 days and they lament the fact of, some of the issues of the day, the obesity we talk about, the excessive loud noise by these bands and wherever these noise are emanating from.
And the other thing I want to mention,
yes.
and the other thing, the way we treat the environment, how we discard of our garbage, our cups, our beer bottles, and all the trash that we leave in rows of for who to clean, I don't know. So that's another aspect of the whole health issue. Yeah,
we'll touch on it as we get deeper. But the question I was going to pose to you is that based on what we are accustomed of seeing on those 2 days, and for some reason they're being highlighted. You were saying, I got from your interjection earlier, in that these problems are not just there, or they didn't just show up for these 2 days. They are there, but it seems as if seeing that these 2 days give us this sort of leeway to go the extra mile, as it were, then that is the time some persons become aware And we normally, some of us have that kind of a lifestyle all year long and not paying particular attention to these little things that can add up to our health and other issues that we're discussing tonight.
Yes, exactly. But what I was trying to emphasize is that usually it's the morality of it we up in arms about. But I'm saying what we forget, it's because of Lent is coming. It's because you're not going to be able to do any of these so-called immoral things, like jumping the road, loud music in Lent. So that is the reason as well. So especially from those who maybe have this moral crusade against the carnival, what they don't realize is that at present, I would sort of bet that 75% of the people who participate in the carnival, if you ask them why there is carnival, they will tell you that carnival is because it's a festival we have before Lent, because Lent we cannot do all these things.
Okay.
So I'm saying, so especially with those who are moralizing about the so-called immoral things in carnival, what they forget is that the reason the carnival even exists is because of something to do with that same immorality.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I'm saying that those things that we get so concerned about are there all the time. All the time. People are obese all the time. We should even be happy those people are getting 2 days of exercise. The majority of them don't exercise otherwise.
Yeah, matter of fact, just to help concretize the point that you're making in terms of the excessive noise.
Yeah.
We have some persons with vehicles that they go up and down ever so often with these very, very loud pounding songs.
Right.
And so sometimes we just hear them pass.
Right.
But we take very little note. And it's on those days now, when we are subjected to it in a way that 8 hours or 6 hours or whatever it is, then we say, wow, you know, that is too much, that is too much. Not realizing we have been subjected to it all throughout the year.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. And even in terms of the noise, we know how little effort is made by the authorities to enforce the Noise Abatement Act.
Yeah.
We know how little effort is made by the authorities to enforce the smoking in public. We also know how hard the health ministry is trying to promote healthy living and eating, but at the same time, you have a proliferation of imported food. Local food is expensive. Farmers not getting help. So, I mean, I'm saying the blame is not just to those couple individuals who we might find are behaving in a manner that we don't like on Carnival Monday and Tuesday. I'm saying there's a broader societal thing going on that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, it just becomes a knee-jerk reaction on Ash Wednesday every year.
Yeah. All right, folks, thanks for tuning in. Those of you who have just tuned in, we're having a very important conversation that is with Dr. IP here. He is basically going down deeper in the whole health aspect, carnival activities. Well, it's highlighted during carnival celebrations, and of course, the excessive noise situation that comes along with that. Brother Alvin, you have been there listening. Your take, based on what you have been hearing, sir.
Thanks, Lofty. Thanks. No, I think IP has given a snapshot of in sort of made comments on some of the major issues. And I think I tend to agree with him that the 2 days of revelry that we have, this carnival, is a snapshot of showing us what are some of the underlying issues or images that we have as a country. And I like the way that he sort of referenced the whole question of the electoral reform. And I think that is true in a sense that you've heard me sounding like an old record on this program, saying that election has consequences. Because clearly, all of what he's mentioned, if you take, for example, the whole question of the obesity and the fact that people are not necessarily living a what I would say, quote unquote, the right lifestyle in terms of their activities and what they eat, in itself fits us back into a policy issue. Because if, for example, the government policy is such that you can import each and anything that you want, then obviously you give the people a choice now of maybe the bad foods that shouldn't be coming in. If your food policy for the country is such that you do not pay enough emphasis on promoting salads and the right foods to eat, then obviously people will gravitate towards the bad food. If you do not have a proper food feeding programs in your school, obviously kids will eat more of the chips and the KFCs and what have you, because that is less expensive. So policy. If on the other hand, you do not have a priority as a government to provide more open space, parks and playing fields where young folks can go and run and play football and cricket and exercise, then obviously now that we're in a social media era where everyone is on a cell phone, a tablet or what have you, then that policy will have its implication on the people. So yeah, he's right. I agree with him entirely. Some of the areas that he mentioned, and last but by no means least is the whole question of enforcement. Enforcement plays a critical part. So all of that, what he has said and what some of the comments that I just made, ties in with the question of election has consequences. And herein lies the important thing of your election, your electoral process.
Yeah.
If you get wrong people in the decision seat to make decision on behalf of the rest of the people, then you'll have bad results like we see on the 2 days of Carnival.
Yeah, indeed. Doc, the conversations that we normally have here, they are, kind of interactive in nature. So I'm going to go to the live feed now and take 2 comments from there and have you comment on them as well. Special invited guest here. Prince B writes, don't forget the excessive alcohol consumption. That too, Prince B is saying, is very, very unhealthy. Patricia Garowe Inglis writes, the Noise Abatement Act appears to have no teeth. This is an ongoing problem. Buses filled with citizens, babies, children, and the elderly are blasting music with no regard for their clientele. She continues, it's basically a lifestyle. Carnival always existed. It's just that the decadence, which is so apparent in our society, is now considered to be the norm. Yes, this is a matter of concern. Are there any students pursuing studies in ENT? That is where you're specialized, Dr. IP, in ENT surgery. She ends by saying it will be greatly appreciated.
Okay. You want me to comment on that?
Yes, sure.
Right. Fine. I will just add a little bit to what Alvin said. Alvin said he referred to why the reform is important vis-a-vis election results and the people you put in there. But I'll be bold enough to say that also, well then, the reform is important for you to take them out. You put them in already, they're in already. So the concentration now is to take out who is in there, because who is in there not doing the work. So I'd just like to add that without fear.
Doc, just before you move across, your computer, whatever it is, dropped a bit, so we are not seeing too much of,
Of me?
Right, very well. That's it, right? Better here.
Yeah. So, and there's another thing I want to You see, I'm trying to balance the whole negativity because I'm a carnivalist myself. I'm going to say that. The whole negativity that seems to be being put at the feet of the carnival. There's another thing happening in carnival when it comes to health. We live in a country, a tropical country where we have beaches and rivers and everything. But our modern lifestyle, I would put it to you that 80% of the people who are sort of sparsely clothed in those bands, maybe that's the first time in 6 months they get any sun on their bodies. Now, when you're exposed to sunlight, which we should be in the Caribbean, that's how you get vitamin D. That's this thing you get in called liver oils and all these oils. Now, one of the present problems related to ill health is the low levels of vitamin D, even in our population. Why? Because of lifestyle again. People are indoors most of the time. They don't walk to work. They're in a bus. They drive to work in the air-conditioned cars and buses. They work maybe from 7 in the morning to 5 at night. They go home. So something that we shouldn't be experiencing in the health sector, which is almost an epidemic of vitamin D deficiency, is what is contributing to some of the same chronic non-communicable diseases. So I just like to add that. And so, and it is, I say that because what I think part of our reform needs to be is to look at both sides of the story a little bit more. We tend to just focus on the side that pleases us, the side we want that is in keeping with our personal position, and not consider the sides of others. I think, and so in talking about carnival and health, I will admit to a certain extent I'm here to sort of defend carnival a little bit. The alcohol excess, it's another thing, and the comment is quite appropriate, because if during the year you're not doing anything about the excessive, as a country, as a citizenry, about the excessive use of alcohol, it is accepted. Children can go and buy a alcoholic drink in most places. Nobody asks them, well, you're too young. That used to happen to before, and that type of thing. So when you see them with a glass on Carnival Monday, maybe with alcohol in it, I mean, you can criticize it. It really shouldn't be happening, but you should be asking yourself, how could this be? Why? How did we get here? And I don't think we're asking these questions. We're not asking the whys enough. And so, since I'm not interested in highlighting the problems that everybody knows, I think these are the things we need to reform. How we think about this stuff. How often we asking why we need to have carnival? If it's so bad and it's so thing, why are we having it? And if we having it, these are the reasons why we having it. In the comment about ENT, there is a young Dominican, at least one I know, who is.
Doc, not tripping you. Just tilt down that cam.
No, I moved.
Yeah,
I
just
moved.
yeah, better. Yeah,
I'm
better.
moving.
Yeah, better. Good.
Movement is good for your health. That's why you're supposed to exercise. So in terms of the ENT, there is a young Dominican national that I know who is training to be a full ENT and head and neck surgeon. He was here. I think he's gone back for further training. So at least I know of one person. But that's not my responsibility, I must say. That's a responsibility of the authorities. You're not going to wait until I retire or die to ensure that the people have an ENT to replace me. So again, it still goes back to those in authority, to what extent those socio-political economic factors that they have control over is also maybe the biggest contributor to those things that are undermining our health at Carnival and every day.
Yeah, true. Thanks. Dory Drygo writes here, Doc, you're on point. In my view, the 2 days of Carnival celebrations highlight our daily habits, good, bad, or indifferent, coming to the forefront.
Okay.
But
Maury,
let me
Mark,
ask.
so let me read one more comment, Alvin, and then you can comment. Maury Jules writes here, in the Virgin Islands, after the last ban passed through the parade, the Virgin Islands waste management team has a crew cleaning up the streets behind the ban the same day. I think Dr. IP touched on that earlier in terms of the garbage disposal and stuff. So this brother here is just writing as to what happens in his neck of the wood when that.
Yeah, but in my view, in the nature aisle, that cleanup supposed to be happening during the jump up. You're supposed to have people making money in the band during the jump up, making an income by just picking up bottles. The band's supposed to have that as part of their permission to be on the road. Because when you have a show in anywhere in Dominica, part of getting the permission is what I imagine what you have in place to clean up after the show. So I am saying again, if we say we are the nature eye and we practice in that, really and truly we're supposed to be better than the Virgin Islands. It shouldn't be after. It should be all during the carnival. You have to wonder whether people jumping up, because before you have a thing to drop, somebody's picking it up and getting rid of it. And that becomes the responsibilities of the band and the band leaders. So,
yes, true.
That's part of my take on it.
Yeah, Alvin, you're about to make a point.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of, in light of what IP has said so far, I guess there are two areas that I would need some focus. One, how did we get there? And two, how are we going to get out from there? If we're able to get out at all, I don't know. But I'm sure I'm a man of hope, and I always live with hope. But how did you think we got there? Because, I mean, IP myself, I love Carnival. Played a lot of Carnival during my days in Dominica as a young man, and still, love a Carnival. We have ours coming up here in Atlanta in May, and I'm involved with planning some activities. So how did we get there? The fact that young people are consuming that much alcohol, the fact that you see so many young people as obese as they are, and how do we get out of it? Because that's crucial. I mean, we are there now, and we can't continue on that trajectory. Otherwise, I mean, we won't have a Dominica as it is with the people. So, like you said at the start of your program, we may not have all the answers, but at least we could say, well, hey, this is what I think has brought us where we are. And this is what we need to do collectively to take us onto a different road.
Yeah. My comment on that, I think that's an excellent point. And it speaks to what I think is most important in all these activities is the why. And I think if I had to say how we got there is because we, by and large, want to continue to have the same behavior and expect a different result. I think we forget that most of what we do, we copied from elsewhere. We have practically everything we do in our daily lives in Dominica. It's somebody else has done it before. It's what they do over there. So we have largely continued to just, I mean, innocently maybe, or simply just copy what others do without examining it for ourselves and to see to what extent that is good for us. Why am I doing it anyway? So that kind of dependency that we practice over the years, all of a sudden, it puts us in a position where we can't even exist if we're not consuming what somebody else has come up with. So so that is what I think is part of the problem, is that we have become a dependent culture. We depend on others for practically everything. It's what they say, it's what the prime minister says that goes, it's what whoever says, the president, I mean, and that, and even to the extent where even our daily lives, we have to wait for somebody to tell us to pick up a cup. We have to wait for somebody to tell us, don't smoke there. We have to wait for somebody to say, you should exercise so you could stay well. That's because we have just become a people more and more who are right now, well, just dependent. We just consume what others. We seem to have lost that ability to think for ourselves and question and create for ourselves. So unless we stop and reform, it's just going to be more of that, because we've been bombarded every day from outside. I mean, it's more WhatsApp and more whatever, social media and more TV. And when you think about it, is that, and the food and everything, how we become obese, if we didn't feel that those things that come from elsewhere are better than what we have, we wouldn't be that obese, because we'll be consuming local, fresh stuff that doesn't have high caloric content, and according to Mr. Scarrett, that doesn't have bohio, and I mean, but that's the best the person in authority can do, tell you to put bohio in your food. That's crazy. Yeah. I mean, come on. The bohio comes in from where? Where is the promotion of using chive and celery that grows in your backyard and making it bohio so expensive, or making alcohol so expensive that you have to think twice about when you're going to spend your little hard-earned dollar on it?
Yeah.
So I think it's that continued perpetuating that kind of looking outside of ourselves by the authorities, by those in authority at this present time, is the major factor in all of this. Because in Dominica, you will find that things Dominican those seem to be valued. The people, I mean, other people are valued more in Dominica than Dominica. A Dominican these days doesn't feel as equal as somebody who is visiting or foreigner who is there. So if that were the case, we'd be eating local food. We'd be having local practices. We'd be enjoying our beaches and rivers and stuff. But we're not doing that. So what does that say? Because we don't think it's valuable. We don't think it's important. And you have people in authority by their policies. So that's why I think the reform is crucial. There's very little being done to stem that kind of approach, and then making us more and more dependent, where, as far as I'm concerned, we like to cry about our ancestors, our African ancestors who caught us and sold us to the white man. But I mean, right now, I think it's much easier to do that in the present day Dominica than it was then. So I am saying there is a broader aspect to this thing that we are neglecting and demonizing carnival, when carnival is like pain. It's like when you get pain, is a protective device. It's something to tell you, well, something is wrong. Stop doing that. Don't put your hand in the fire. So maybe the carnival is really a little warning sign to help us to stop and think. But yet we're not looking at it like that. We kind of demonizing the carnival and saying, oh, them people were doing that. At least that's what I heard on the radio.
True. All right, Doc. Great points so far, indeed. African Queen is writing here, and that is a sentiment I've been hearing over and over, especially around the carnival season in particular, by a number of persons living around what we know today as our stadium in the city. African Queen writes, and I want to believe it's a she, I feel sorry for the senior citizens in the Goodwill area adjacent to the stadium. Every time there's a jam there, especially at the courtyard, that person writes, the noise is unbearable because you can literally hear the jam in full force in your bedrooms and you just cannot sleep. That for sure, you know, the comments I've been getting. Lofty, when are you guys going to deal with that issue in terms of bringing it up, talking about it so that something can be done? And she just basically reminded me of the fact here. So that, Doc, what based on the, what can you comment on that comment?
Well, I think it's legitimate, and I'm sure it's legitimate, but it raises the issue of how we behave. My point about it is what do we do about it? Even those individuals who are directly affected, even the families of those elderly people who maybe can't do much for themselves, who can't call the radio, who can, you know, and furthermore, it highlights that it's not just about that little period of those 2 days. I am saying there are jams happening, not only in the stadium, all about the place, where a loud noise after 10 p.m. at night, people can't get to sleep, they have to go to work in the morning, their pressure goes up, they're stressed out, they have anxiety. But if there is not enough evidence to demonstrate that we are concerned about this thing, especially in the so-called nature aisle, how can you have that? How can you have somebody boasting that we are the nature aisle and according to where you are, you come as a tourist or a visitor or returning Dominican, and I mean, you come to the nature aisle and maybe 3 nights out of the 5 nights you're here, you're subjected to loud noise after 10 o'clock, and nobody seems to be able to enforce the existing regulations to make sure that doesn't happen. And to make it worse, you might have a partiality based on your political persuasion, where certain people might get hustled for doing it and others don't. So it's all well and good fearing, but what I'm saying is that it just demonstrates to the extent to which the culture we have in Dominica is the one where, well, when it's not really affecting me, you know, I stay out of it because I believe it's never going to affect me. So it's the same thing with electoral reform. That's the culture. Most people are not interested in it because they don't really see it as affecting them directly. But it will eventually affect you. So it goes back to our concern for the other. How do we see ourselves in our brothers and our fellow Dominicans? How do we feel about when somebody is being persecuted for something that maybe as right as saying, well, the noise is too loud on Carnival Monday and Tuesday. We don't do anything about it because it doesn't affect us. So I am saying part of the issue and part of what needs to be done is that we need our culture, the way we love and care about each other, the way we're concerned about the other when it doesn't affect us, is maybe it starts with each and every one of us. So that's my comment on that. I'm saying it's all well and good to point out the problem, but for everybody who has the problem is what they're doing about it, because as far as I'm concerned, the problem is there. You cannot undo the problem. You've already been exposed to loud noise. You cannot prevent it. So even making noise about it, it's kind of counterproductive. Is there anything that you can do as an individual, or you can do the next time you hear loud noise, or you hear somebody else getting persecuted for walking in the road because they're trying to get reform so that you don't have to get any loud noise, your concern you have for them. So it's a wider structure where, there's enough blame to go around on all of us.
Yes, indeed. Doc, could you imagine it's already 7 o'clock? A matter of fact, to be precise, it's 1 minute past 7 already. And we haven't even, touched some of the harder material as yet. But you know how it is. I guess we can polish up that conversation maybe in another engagement.
No problem. That's all right. I don't have any harder material to touch, just for you and I.
But we have to take a break now. Let us take that break, that all-important break at the first segment. And then when we come back, we're going to ask Dr. Atlas if he can, give us his wrapping up final comments on that segment. Let's take a break, people. We're going to do that one from Midnight Groovers. Bring back the milk and honey.
Oh Lord, look upon my people, cause we are going out of our culture. The oppressors have syndrome of sin. We need to build back ourselves. Whoa, whoa.
Bring back the milk and honey.
Angels and bush medicine.
Bring back the milk and honey.
Vanilla and cassava.
Bring back the milk and honey.
Coconut oil and castor.
Bring back the milk and honey.
Oh yes, my people, hear the cry of Groovers. We are oppressed, so long we've been kept on. Remember he said be fruitful, brothers, we need more natural. Hey, hey.
Bring back the milk and honey.
Angels and bush medicine.
Bring back the milk and honey.
Vanilla and cassava.
Bring back the milk and honey.
Coconut oil and castor.
Bring back the milk and honey.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Dominicans, bring back the milk and honey days, as said Gramax.
Milk and honey.
And also Midnight Groovers out of Dominica. Grand Bay. Bring back the good old things that used to keep us as a people.
Oh Lord, look upon my people, cause we are going out of our culture. The oppressors have changed our sins. We need to build back ourselves. Oh Lord,
Bring back the milk and honey.
angels and bush medicine.
Bring back the milk and honey.
Vanilla and cassava.
That's a powerful number from the man himself, Chubby.
And castor.
Basically telling us in song, in patois, that is, we have to build back ourselves as a people, huh?
Hear the cry of Groovers. We are oppressed, so long we've been kept on. Remember he said be fruitful, brothers, we need more natural. Oh yeah.
Bring back the milk and honey.
Angels and bush medicine.
Bring back the milk and honey.
Vanilla and cassava.
Bring back the milk and honey.
Coconut oil and castor.
Bring back the
Well,
milk and honey.
All right, Doc, so would you agree with Chubby and the Midnight Groovers that, part of the solution now, seeing that we are now on the action solution part of the program, that part of what Groovers is saying in song, basically, we can go back to these days to try to eliminate some of what we have been plagued with?
Yes, I think it essentially captures what I think is important is that we need to we need to find our lost selves, because the milk and honey was part of who we used to be.
Yeah.
And that reference to the milk and honey is reference to nature and eating local and giving our local and ourselves priority first before we give that priority to others. I think that is what, for me, in essence, it captures. But the other thing it captures is something that maybe we don't pay attention to much anymore, which is prevention is better than cure. We by our reactions, especially to these things that we don't like, we seem to be focused. We seem to be putting a lot more concentration on cure, even in our health, even when it comes to our health, than prevention. So you find people in Dominica less and less doing the things to prevent themselves from getting ill. And then when they get ill, struggling to find the money, whatever, to go to the doctor, to do the exams, to get the treatment. So I think that is what, for me, Chubby captures with those words. And I think also it's a little bit more about how we consume, how we just consume anything anybody tells us or where we get them from without examining it. And to me, if we behave like that, it reflects not a hate for ourselves, but as if we don't have enough love of ourselves, and we don't care about ourselves anymore. We may be so abused and beaten down, we don't even have the energy to self-care and to self-love and to love our brothers and sisters as much as we love ourselves. Yeah. So that would be my closing comments on
Doug, one question. I had a question written down there, and it just slipped me. One question I want to ask you before you go. Is that you are a professional in that field, the ENT aspect of things.
Yes.
As we're talking about preventative now in terms of, what can someone do?
Yeah.
Just give us, for example, from your own professional standpoint, what would be your advice to, for example, someone in a band setup and that music is coming through so loud, excessively loud? Give us a practical things that person can do to help, eliminate the health situation on their body, their eardrum, their whatever it is, just some practical stuff before you go.
Okay, the loud noise actually affects your nerve of hearing. So if it's too loud for an extended period of time, it can damage your nerve of hearing, where instead of having difficulty hearing when you get to 80, you might have difficulty hearing when you get to 40 or 45, okay? Now, it's not just only, so simply, everybody knows when the noise is loud. I mean, your senses might be dulled by the intoxicants you're taking at the time, so it's not apparent to you. So I might be on the side of the band, totally normal. Somebody in the band who maybe has a few drinks is not even aware the extent to which. So that's where the prevention comes in. All treatment starts with prevention. As a physician, I try to emphasize that all treatment starts with prevention. So it means if you care about yourself, you're going into a band, you have to know, even before you go in, know what is your health situation, know what are the possible risks, what may happen. You may get into a fight, you may be dehydrated, all those things. So that's where the prevention comes in. On the day of the carnival, the thing is that would be to stay as far as possible from the speakers. Because the closer you are to the speakers, the more likely, the higher the vibration, and the more likely it's going to damage your nerve of hearing. You can decide if you're going to jump, you mightn't be aware because you want to have a little extra drink that you're not going to have for Lent. You could wear earplugs. You could put a little bit of cotton in your ear. And you don't stay exposed to that loud noise for an extended period of time. Normally, we say 8 hours to loud noise above a certain decibel is what will damage your hearing. But I'm not saying you wouldn't want to wait for 2 hours. For 8 hours, you would want to say, you know what? Let me get out of the noise. Let me go take a break so that that noise that I'm enjoying jumping up to doesn't damage my nerve of hearing and give me hearing loss that I have to now find money to buy a hearing aid for me to do my work in 5 years. So I think it's just basic common sense about what it means. It's more about having a concern for your health and your welfare and recognizing that prevention. Maybe you might have to decide, well, I have a problem with my hearing, I shouldn't go in that band because that music is just too loud. I mean, we don't need somebody to come and tell you that. Yeah. If we have been like that, it's because we become so dependent on others telling us how to live our lives, what to do. And I think that would be my response to that.
All right. Well, Doc, thank you very much, my brother. I know what time has come and gone, but trust me, it was time well spent this evening here with you.
Thank you. I hope so.
You basically, based on the feedback that we saw coming through, persons commenting, they basically got something to go off here. So on behalf of the number of folks here and on behalf of the team of Civic Vibes, we want to say thank you very much for your invaluable contribution to the program, and wish you all the best as you continue the rest of the evening, brother.
Thank you. Welcome.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you indeed.
Thank you. Thank you, IP. Have a good one, my brother.
All right, Alvin, thanks. You look very distinguished in that gray beard. I haven't seen you for a long time.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, folks, that is it for us here in terms of the first segment, the first leg that is of the program here this afternoon. Again, we want to thank Dr. Irvin Pascal. I know he doesn't like to hear that formal name indeed, but we want to thank him in a very profuse way, that is for spending some time of his afternoon here with us, basically just helping us as it pertains to our health, be it in music or what we eat, whatever it is. We just want to thank him very, very much. Folks, continue to be here with us. If you need a little refresher at this time, you can do so. We're going to get ready for the next leg of the program where Alvin and myself, primarily Alvin, he will basically go down deeper in some of the reporting that Brother Byron did for us and continue to do for us as a country where electoral reform is concerned in Dominica. But before we do, let's take a song here from our brother Nasio Fontaine, entitled this one, Unite. Trust me, we need to come around and unite as a people where these reforms are concerned. We'll be back in just a bit.
Come on, people, say we've got to unite. Brother and sister, say we've got to unite. Why can't we unite? Lord, I wanna know now. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, can't we unite? Lord, why can't we unite? Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, can't we unite? Lord, united we stand, so divided we fall. We must unite, topple these walls, Lord. 400 years, divided too long. We must unite, if we must be strong. Whoa, 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 whoa. Every time I look around, I see my people suffer, Lord. Every time I look around, I seem to feel the pain. Why can't we unite? Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, can't we unite? Lord, why can't we unite? Black and white. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, can't we unite? Lord.
So yes, Dominicans, as we get ready for our second leg of the conversation here,
We've got to unite. We've got to unite.
we're listening from a very important track from our brother Nasio Fontaine from Dominica.
Got to unite, so why?
Yes, we must unite to topple these walls. 400 years is much too long. We must unite, Dominicans, if we have to be strong. The words of brother Nasio indeed.
Why can't we unite?
And yes, the all-important question, why, just why are we not uniting?
Harder than earth, we'll open a gap. Forcing on fighting, can only keep us apart. Lord, 400 years, yes.
All right, folks, in the interest of time, let's get to our next segment here. Brother Alvin and I will be dealing with that for you. And the next segment is dubbed in terms of topic. Electoral reform is part of Civic Vibes Child. So we will not be moving away. We'll not be deviating from that topic anytime soon. And yes, this afternoon, we're going to go down a bit deeper in asking an all-important question to you guys out there. Electoral reform. Are we as a people ready?
You want it now?
Brother Alvin, where are you, sir?
You're fine.
Yes, Lofty. Thank you again, and to all many persons who are logged in on the various media platforms, listening to our Civic Vice program this afternoon. I want to take, how should I say it? Yes, we're going to look at certain aspects of Sir Byron's report, but even before we do that, Lofty, I want to kind of just make a few comments, and that is in light of discussions that were held this past week on the radio. I'm not sure if you were privy to have listened to some of the discussions taking place on this matter of electoral reform. You had several persons in the media speaking on it. I think it started off on the Tuesday night with Global View on Q. You had a panel of at least 10 or 12 people, including yourself. Everybody giving their 5 cents to make up that $1 bill. And then, of course, that followed on the radio. You had Mackenzie, myself came in, former Prime Minister Edison James, a number of folks been talking on this whole question of electoral reform. And I want to begin this afternoon to put, to look at it within a certain context. And the first thing I want to ask and pose, for those of us who are there with us on the program, listening and hearing, who are the main players in electoral reform? Because in the discussion that ensued last week, I heard some people saying, well, let the politicians do it, which the Prime Minister must do, and it is more the Prime Minister than the Commission. It's not the Commission. The Commission is just there to do so. And unless Prime Minister Kerry does so, we will not get it. So it's all over the place. So the question is, who are the main players? If we take it from a pyramid, who are the main players? I would submit that the main actors in this reform is the people, the electorate. These are the main actors, the people. And then I would move to that next level, which is the Electoral Commission. I get the sense that some people want to abdicate that responsibility, but there is a reason why we have an Electoral Commission in our Constitution. The Electoral Commission is an authority vested in our Constitution. So, our Constitution starts with the people. The Commission is in the Constitution. Also, the government, the executive, the judicial, the legislature, all that is in our Constitution. So I would say the people, the Electoral Commission, and then the government. Why do I start on that basis? If the people, if Dominicans do not fully understand or see the reasoning or the rationale or the relationship of Electoral Commission, it doesn't matter what the Electoral Commission wants, what the government wants, nothing will happen. If, on the other hand, the Commission doesn't exercise its responsibility under the Constitution, as required under Section 38, I think it is, responsible for elections, then the whole process is, one might say, is a waste of time. And then I see the role of government. Like we said before, yes, the government has a role to ensure that whatever legislations that are going to be presented to the Parliament is put together by the executive, headed by the Prime Minister, placed before Parliament, with the understanding that the people has their fingerprints on it and what's in it is in their best interest, placed before the Parliament to enact into law. And also that the government has a responsibility through the Minister of Finance to make sure that when budgetary provisions are being made, that there is adequate allocation in terms of financial resources and human resources so that it can undertake its work. I thought before that the inadequate resource of the commission in terms of its manpower and its resources to do its work. But so having said that now, Lofty, here's the big question. How do the people now, which I just highlighted as the number one, view electoral reform? And how do they see it as something that affects them or impacts them? I said to Matt on the program when I called last week as one of the contributors that we need to go out on the ground to the people of I know there has been some consultations prior to all where we are now, but bear in mind we've been at that discussion for 15 plus years now. So the question remains, if the people are supposedly the main actors in the whole scheme of things, if you were to go to St. Joseph, for example, on the blocks, where the young 18-year-old who is qualified to, or maybe qualified to register to vote, once you're 18 years of age and you meet certain requirements, residency, and all the other things, you're not a criminal, you're not, a convict, then you can register to vote. You're a citizen of Dominica. If you were to go to the block in St. Joe, and just as the average Joe Blow or guy out there, hey, dude, what? Tell me about electoral reform. You know what that's about? What do you think would be the response? You go to Grand Bay, you rock around Rosary, you go to Layo, you go Carib Territory, you go Marigot, you go Wesley, Woodford Hill, name it. Any one of those communities, and you run into one of these young persons and just pose the question to them. What do you think of electoral reform? Is that something that affects you or impacts you? What do you think would be the answer? How does it impact you as a citizen? I mean, if you go to the student at the college or at the college somewhere, grammar school, and you ask them, hey John, you've heard there's a lot of talk going around on electoral reform. Does that affect you as a student? Is there anything does it worry you? Do you have a stake in there? You ask the bus driver who's driving his bus up and down, like just so they increase the fares from whatever to whatever. That's a decision that has the fingerprint of the government, because the board that approves the increase in bus fare had a stake in that. That's all tied in with the government's, regulatory framework. So you ask that bus driver, you hear about electoral reform. I mean, does that affect you? The bus driver from Grand Bay or wherever he's coming from. Approach the businessman in Roseau. Hey man, how's things going? What's this electoral reform? Do you think that affects you as a businessman? I mean, what impact that is? You go in the heights somewhere and you meet the farmer on his farm. Hey, Mr. Brown, what does electoral reform? The point I'm making here is that until the people get a full understanding of the importance of electoral reform, the impact it can have on their lives, whether as a student, whether as a bus driver, whether as a business person, whether as a farmer, whether as a nurse, we are going to have a problem. And go ahead, Lofty, go ahead.
On that note, Alvin, what I want to just come in here to say or to add to what you're saying is that it is so important that you're making that point, in that the ordinary people, the masses as we call them, that information in terms of the pros and cons of the topic at hand, electoral reform, it has to be clearly articulated to these people on the ground, in that When I go around the country, Alvin, and the exact situation that you're posing there, I get the sense just from the utterances of these people that electoral reform as a topic, it is not number one priority on all of these people, the listing that you mentioned there. What I am getting, and I'll be true to conscience, is that this electoral reform talk or this electoral reform agenda, it is more binding. It has more to do with the politicians and the political parties. So I am not a politician. I am not a member of any political party. That is a little down on my agenda. If you ask some of the younger people, for example, about bread and butter issues, the salary in terms of an increase, you will get a different response. And so I said that to sort of qualify what you're saying, to let you know, yes, that is the sort of feedback that persons are getting on the ground. But just to complement what you're saying now and say, okay, the messaging now of that reform agenda is what needs to be tweaked so that the school child, the farmer, the bus driver, the fireman, the policeman, whatever strata of life you are operating from, you should know how you fit in that pyramid that you spoke about, and how by having proper reforms, electoral reform, political reforms, that is, how are you, no matter where you are, going to be a beneficiary of those reforms. So I agree with you 100%, but the messaging of that, whoever is bringing out the message, it has to be able to, that direct injection, it has to do the trick. And I must lament here that it has not done that trick thus far, hence this sort of resistance rather to the topic that we're discussing.
And therefore, herein lies the challenge or the responsibility that we have. And when I say we, I'm referring to Civic Vibes and all the various other organizations that are involved in that process. As you rightly point out, the messaging has to be correct. The messaging has to resonate with the individual. So take the student, for example. Let's take a student at the college. You might approach and say, well, hey, do you see electoral reform impacting your life or affecting you? And the first initial response may be no. But then if you engage further into a conversation and you were to say to the student, well, look, your college is still not fully rehabilitated since after Hurricane Maria. You still do not have a fully functioning lab. You still do not have a fully covered roof. The facilities are still in a shamble. And that is what electoral reform is all about. Because what you do by your vote as an 18-year-old student or 19 or 20-year-old student, when you vote, you are ensuring that your electoral process is such that it doesn't allow for folks who are not, one, qualified to be candidates or does not meet certain requirements to be candidate, find themselves elected to government, and in turn create bad education policy that then now impacts you as a student at the college. And we can take we can express the same scenario across the board to the farmer. Your agriculture policy. What are the policies that are there for agriculture? The businessman, the bus driver, any one of those categories. So I think we have to, while the various nuances like the residency and the electors list, the voters registry and all of those sort of things need to be explained in the process. But I think fundamentally, we have to get the people, the citizens, to understand and to recognize their whole involvement or the impacts they be out of electoral reform. How does a bad electoral process impact their day-to-day lives as citizens? And that is why I will say again, I see IP is the first boy. That's good. IP in the country. No IP, that's fine. We'd love to have your comment on that. I see you. Don't escape. Don't escape. Stay right there. I see you. So we would like what is their how that impact their lives. And again, I will keep repeating it as often as I can. Elections have consequences. I mean, we saw what happened in the United States of America with Donald Trump. We saw the consequences. We saw what happened January 6th at the Capitol. So I think what is so important is the messaging. So
that is key.
We have to, and when I hear, for example, people saying that, well, the prime minister must do X, Y, and Z, and we must get the prime minister to do X, Y, and Z. There's a term they call esprit malpapai, and we've had that esprit malpapai for 15 years. That is not to say I'm in any way suggesting that he should not do what he needs to do as the executive head, but for us to solely leave that onto him without getting our message in a manner that the people will say, hey, man, the student is going to say, you know what? No, now I see that electoral reform is going to affect me. The bus driver, the business person. I think that's what we had to do. Because some of those, without just ending Lofty, some of those programs are structured in such a way that you would swear we have in an academic exercise for some students sitting in a classroom trying to write a paper on politics or political science of some sort. I think we have to get down to brass tacks on the ground with the man on the street and say to him, hey, this is what this thing is about. This is how it's going to impact your lives. And if you are not involved in it, this is the likelihood.
True. I agree with you 100% in terms of getting down to the brass tacks of things. There was this, and just in a while, folks, I'm going to read to us so that we can get a much better understanding of what the report from Byron contains thus far. And that is what Civic Vibes is all about. It is the process of passing on that information to you guys out there in very low dosage so that you can make the right decisions when that time comes around. There was this, should I say that cliche, Alvin, where in the tourism business in Dominica, it was said once when we were marketing Dominica as a tourism destination that tourism is everybody's business.
Yes, I remember that.
And that sort of latched on to Dominicans, both here and abroad. And so I think as part of the messaging that we're talking about, we have to bring it down to the level to let Dominicans understand that electoral reform now is everybody's business, yes, but it is also your business as well. And so once the persons would have latched onto that, like they did with that tourism is everybody's business, then they would have a better appreciation for what, as IP always like to say, what they can do about the situation. So that is where, you know, as I said, I'll agree with you that the tweaking of that message, because on the ground in certain quarters, and I guess it is designed that way, in that the electoral reform topic, some persons, you know, sort of dissect it to mean it is taking out one and putting the other. And so that level of, you know, political tribalism that exists in Dominica, you know, if that is the message, or if that is what is the primary reason that comes to the fore when that topic comes around, then we will be in that stalemate position, because nobody wants their quote-unquote party to be out of power. Those who are out of power wants their party to come into power. But if we say, okay, It is to benefit your life, your family life, your future. And so it is there for posterity, for Dominica's development. Then if we can get people to understand that, as young as they are, how as old as they are, then I think we would have been making some.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, in any human nature as it is, always gravitate towards what is called the acronym is what's in it for me, WIFM. Okay, there's always that what's in it for me, and it's just one of humans' nature. You know, maybe some people might say selfish, but it's basically that the student or the bus driver, the business person, the farmer is going to ask the question, what's in it for me? WIFM. Okay. And if you cannot present and articulate to them what's in it for me, or they themselves cannot see what's in it for me, then there's not going to be that engagement that is required. And I think as we move forward on the drive, because I mean, there's a lot of talk about, oh, well, we need to see what's in the legislation, which is true. I'm not dismissing that and what is involved. But unless the student understand, or the bus driver, hey, what's in it for me as a voter, the electoral reform, all this other technical stuff like residency, voters registry, campaign finance, all of those hyphenated stuff would mean very little to them.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that so that in the next few days leading up to all what needs to be done, we need to really focus in that direction. And as I said, don't let the Electoral Commission get away with their role. They have a significant role to play in the whole process. But I see IP still with us. And certainly, I think we should give him the benefit to make a brief comment. He's trying to get away, but tourism is everybody's business. Electoral reform is everybody's business. And it's our business, even for me out here in Atlanta, more so for IP that's in Dominica. IP, what's your take on that? Let's hear a few brief comments. You're muted.
You're muted. We can't hear you. Yes.
I didn't hear most of the discussion since I left after my contribution there. I just heard the last bit, and what I gather is that they're talking about the messaging and the apparent lack of pickup of the whole issue about electoral reform by the man in the street. Am I right on that?
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Difficulty. I think you said it in the last line, the last thing you said about what's in it for me. And I don't think there's anything selfish about that. That's just normal human behavior. At least rational human behavior. Every rational human behavior starts with what's in it for me, because it's you experiencing it. So it has to be what's in it for you. There's nothing selfish about that in my view. So I think it would be, why, and I go back to the history of things, the history of how we get all these rules and regulations and constitution and electoral commission, all of that. Don't forget that we never asked the ordinary man for his input or his opinion. That was something that the middle class and the upper class did, hopefully in a caring way on behalf of the ordinary man. So that's what we're up against now, because don't forget, in all of these so-called things for election and democracy, the only role the ordinary man had in it was on election day, he go and he make an X or Y, whatever. So that, I think, needs to be understood as part of the messaging, and why it's so challenging to get, because it's something we never did. we never had to fight for electoral reform. That was something that was just given. Ordinary men know you get a right to go and vote. You never had to fight for it. And so you should not have to be fighting for it because it's something you're supposed to be given. And like everything else that is your right as a human being that you're not given, then you have to fight for it. So if the ordinary man was fighting for something a little bit more closer to his daily existence, which included electoral reform, I think maybe that's where the problem might be, because we have sort of separated electoral reform and put it in that category that generally, historically, was never the business of the ordinary man that we're trying to motivate now to be part of it. So that's going to be challenging. And if the messaging centered more around the sort of the equal rights and the justice, as Lofty likes to say, injustice anywhere is whatever Lofty always has on his thing, is that's
injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Right. So if it was framed more along those lines of an injustice to the ordinary Dominican, and that there was an injustice in that some people had an unnecessary advantage, an unnecessary preference. So wherein you find there's an injustice against the Dominican island in the sense that the reform processes favors somebody who supports a certain political party that's living overseas, as opposed to the guy who is in Dominica supporting that same political party, because the guy overseas gets a ticket paid and money to come. The guy here has to find his way on the bus. So I think that may be why it's so lukewarm to the ordinary man. I mean, to those of us, who intellectualize a little, and which is the norm, the so-called middle class, yes, we all worked up about it. But how does that affect, how difficult it is to demonstrate to the man how it affects him? We've never done it. We just did it without his permission. He just took it. That's what they say. I must vote for that one. That nobody ever consulted him. So I think that is what is not maybe focused on and in the messaging. So if the electoral reform was maybe part of a larger injustice, because that's what it is. The absence of electoral reform is an injustice.
And that's how we have to incorporate that in the messaging.
Right. Yeah, it's a denial of equality as a Dominican. That's why I always say, if I am equal to any other Dominican, how I cannot comment on what I consider the inadequacies of those in authority, but yet they can say they need to be in authority. I mean, why can't I criticize Skerritt? If we are equal as Dominicans, Skerritt can criticize me and I can't criticize him. What nonsense is that? So it's the same thing. I think if the messaging and the discourse incorporated the inequality in that is happening because of the electoral reform and the injustice, then it's easier for people to see themselves in that inequality and injustice, as opposed to what Lofty said, their narrow political thing about electoral reform is getting their party in or getting their party out.
Yeah. I tend to agree wholeheartedly with you. And I was just looking at some of the comments on the chat. And again, I see one person there say the people who believe that they are presently benefiting from their vote should be made aware that this benefit can disappear if politicians can get into office by legal means. And that is absolutely true. And that is where I believe in politics, whether it is politics, whether it's in Dominica or in America or France, wherever that may be, politics is local and it is driven by your messaging. All politics is driven by your messaging. And I think this is where we have to go. It's a challenge, and I'm saying so purposely based on what I heard from the discussion so far from last week. The process or the whole question of reform, unless the ordinary man can see how that relates to him, we're going to have a serious challenge.
Yeah.
And I want to guard those who now are in that quote unquote hope stage of saying, well, Prime Minister Skerrit should do X, Y, and Z, and Prime Minister Skerrit must do so to get reform. I don't know. I have my doubts on that. Lofty, you might be able to say differently, but I have my doubts on that. But if we can get the people, in other words, and I told that to Matt on his show. I said, look, most of the times on some of those topics as well, some of us feel we comes across as the top-down expert. And we come now and we talk down to the people and say, well, Byron's section says this, we should not do this, we should do that. So we talk down. We don't hear their story. We need to go back to storytelling. We need to hear from these people, listen to them, hear what they have to say. They're part of society. And unlike what some of us might want to believe, just listen to some of the calypsos that came out this carnival and listen to the lyrics. And some of those folks were young people too. So why do you think these people are sleeping or they're not listening? They're listening. They're writing the song. They're penning it themselves. It's in their lyrics. So listen to their story. So I think in moving forward, Lofty, while I'll be happy to point out certain specifics as it relates to the reform itself in terms of residency, what is being proposed, what SUP's looking at, and other aspect of it, I think we need to take it back to the people on the streets and get the people take on the matter and their involvement. What's in it for me?
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Alvin. Indeed. As part of the education here, what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to read, as I said before, parts of the report that Byron put on the table for us to consider as a people in moving forward, way before we talk about even consulting with the people and thereafter taking this draft to Parliament to be implemented. Now, just to contextualize what I'm going to read, I just want to alert the Dominican public that the report that Sudanese Byron issued to us, the report is in two phases or two segments. The first one, it deals with the registration of the electors, all right? And that, he coined it as the Registration of Electors Act, okay? In terms of the reporting part of it. And the second aspect is where he deals with the House of Assembly Elections Act. So basically the first one deals with the individual per se as an elector in terms of what they do, what they shouldn't do before, during, and after polling day. The second one deals with more of the laws as it pertains to the treating, the bribery, the campaign finance reforms, the media access. The second leg deals with that, which is coined as the House of Assembly Elections Act. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to read first, and folks, please take a listen as to the utterances in terms of text of Sudanese Byron so that you guys could be much better acquainted with the report in terms of what he's saying here, the new legislation relating to the registration of voters. It starts by saying introduction. This report introduces, and that is the first report that he's talking about. This report introduces the Draft Registration of Electors Bill 2023, which repeals the Registration of Electors Act, Chapter 203, and the consequential Draft Registration of Electors, Registration 2023. That is point one. Point one, in a nutshell, what Byron is telling us here in point one, the Draft Registration of Electors Bill that he has recommended to the Dominican people, he is suggesting that we do away with the old Registration of Electors Act, which we have been, having as our guide in our constitution under Chapter 203. We do away with that because when he looked at that part of it, he saw a lot of loopholes. That is the reason why we have been having these issues upon issues upon issues ever so often. So in brief, he's saying his draft is proposing that we do away with that. And as a people, we consult with each other and decide on whether what he's recommending, we take it to Parliament. Obviously, there are some issues that we have to flesh out before they're taken to Parliament. All right. All right. Doc, your mic is on.
Your mic is open.
So we would
Use
like
your
to
mic.
Close it, please. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted the feedback. I know they're not recording.
He's away from his computer. Doc, can you hear us?
IP.
Let me see from the our head end we can mute Mike Doc's mic, please. Right. Okay, it is muted now. Thank you very much. So that was section or number one, the new legislation pertaining or relating to the registration of voters. Point number two that Byron said is that they meaning the reports 1, 2. They provide a modern and updated legislative framework for the registration of electors that conforms to international best practice. Their substance is a combination of the existing legislation, the proposed but unimplemented amendments of 2017 and 2019, and the additional reforms proposed during my consultancy. The language is gender neutral and avoids references that are exclusively masculine. It is easy to read and understand and ensures that critical and sensitive elements are clearly and adequately reflected. Particular attention was given to the new provisions on the voter identification card and the confirmation of registration. He continues by saying the voter registration process forms the crux of the electoral system as a whole. Therefore, the system of registration must be beyond reproach. I want to read that line again, people. It says here, the voter registration process forms the crux of the democratic process. And it is due in large part to the fact that the mechanism by which voters are registered must be measured in terms of its contribution to the electoral system as a whole. Therefore, this system of registration must be beyond reproach. The proposed legislative framework is intended to provide electoral registers that are accurate and comprehensive throughout the country. Full stop. So
Stick
folks,
a pin.
yes.
Stick a pin on that, because
Yes.
I'm glad you read that, because that is important, Lofty.
We have a call on the line, Alvin. Let me see if
Oh,
we can
go ahead.
we can just
Take the
engage that caller. Yes, this line, I think. Caller, good evening to you. You are on the program.
Good evening, Lofty.
Hi,
To
good
you and
evening.
your listeners. Lofty, I'm a little late listening into the program, but one thing you just mentioned is something I would like to bring to people's attention so that we can keep an eye on it. And that is the mention of the fact that this new legislation that is being proposed by Sir Dennis, according to him, includes past proposed legislation from 2017 and 2019, which has not yet been passed in Parliament. That, I believe, is in reference to the intended and proposed legislation that the Prime Minister and the government attempted to pass when we went out and protested, and they had to pull it back, the legislation in relation to the bribery and treating rules. I am hoping that I am wrong on that occasion, but I believe that is what it's in reference to. And so I believe we should keep an eye on that. And if necessary, once again, step up the protest action to ensure that this is certainly not part of the legislation put through. It may also be in reference to the legislation, proposed legislation in relation to the re-registration of persons overseas, but I believe it may very well include the bribery and treating sections. So we just need some clarification on that, and we need to ensure that that doesn't happen. Thank you for your work, my brother.
All right, thank you very much, caller, indeed. And yes, we are to be custodians. We are to be very, very vigilant as to what goes before Parliament for final approval. And that is why people, the consultation period, it is so crucial, it is so critical as to the outcome that will be finally be made into law. Yes, Alvin.
Yeah.
But thanks very much, caller, for your.
No, I think the caller made some very good observation. And as I said earlier, we need to get into the specifics, of course. And this whole question, that last section that you read, has to do with, first of all, two major areas. As he says, the registration process forms the crux of the democratic process. So the whole question of residency comes into play. What qualifies you to get on that register's list and so as to vote? So the first process is, what are the criteria to become? Residency being one of them, how long you've been in the country, you're a citizen, you're 18 years, and all the other things that goes with it. And now that you have that list, that voters list becomes a very important aspect of the process. So while other things are just as important, don't get me wrong, campaign financing and all the other stuff, media time, but these two criteria are extremely important, because once your name gets on that list, that determines whether or not you get an identification card and whether or not you are eligible to vote in the process. So I think that's important, and I think the comments that the caller made are very important comments. But all of that I says can come after or during or before you first have to get this person to see the benefit of the reform, the electoral reform. Why is it something that's important to them? And then, having gotten that sensitization, you now move to the more specifics.
Yeah.
In terms of what Byron is proposing in those legislations.
As we wind down here, Alvin, in just a while, someone is asking an all-important question here, and maybe you want to answer. Why? Just why that person is saying, why isn't the Electoral Commission given what it can handle? Okay? Sanitization of the list and re-registration exercise, for example.
Yeah, and I think that too is a very good observation. And remember, as I said earlier, when I outlined the sort of structure, the people, the Electoral Commission, the government, because I think the Electoral Commission has a very important role to play. Even now, under the current existing legislation that we have, bad as it may be, they could go ahead and sensitize and clean up the list. There's certain basic things that the commission commission could do that, they're not doing. So again, commission fit.
Yeah. Your signal keeps going and coming, Alvin.
To the fire. We can't get them an easy pass on that.
Yeah.
Wait. Okay. I was saying that we have to hold your pass on that. And the impression that I get sometimes is that folks are getting the impression, well, it's not so much the commission, getting the impression that the commission just has a mundane or whatever role to play. But this whole process falls to the government and Prime Minister Scary. But yeah, the commission has a very major role to play under the Constitution. They are the ones responsible for holding and conducting and managing anything to do with elections in the country.
Yeah, I think we have. Yeah, Alvin, I think we have time for one more comment, and then we have to bring down the curtains on things. It's already 2 minutes past 8 o'clock, and we don't want to keep our viewership, out of whack in terms of our schedule stoppage time. All right. The last comment there we'll be taking is from Brother John Blanchard. He gave us a mouthful here, but Brother John, for sure, will be dealing with your comment as we're moving along in subsequent conversations. All right. But nonetheless, I'll read it nonetheless because it is there. He writes, gentlemen, I have an issue with several recommendations from Byron. Just to name one. So Dennis Byron is recommending that all registration of voters should cease as soon as an election writ is issued. At present, we can register persons up to midnight on the day the writ was issued. I am suggesting that registration should be extended for at least 48 hours after the writ is issued. Young people, he writes, always wait for last minute to get registered. By extending it to 48 hours, you will allow for this last minute registration. In the absence of that, a fixed date should be set. That is what John is saying here. So based on what John said, Alvin, any final or any comments based on his comment, and then we must wrap it up.
I think it's a valid observation that John is making. And that goes back to the question of the sort of the details. How they say it, the devil is in the details or something to that effect.
Yeah.
So, that goes back to some of the things that contained, and that is where we have to, as well as getting the message across to the people that I referenced earlier, we have to ensure that what goes into the legislation is such that it represents the best interest of the people. And that is where, if the people feels that this matter affects me, and some of those areas that been mentioned, like what John just mentioned and the caller a few minutes ago, these are the matters that the people will articulate for and will protest and call for. But I think it's valid. I think though, moving forward, that I don't know how, like they say, the harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few, but I don't know how, to what extent we, as I said, could get, get on the ground. Let's find out how the people feel. What are the views of the people on the ground? How do they feel about it? I hear the talk about more consultation. But again, we know how this consultation goes. This consultation lofty, centralized, maybe in Roseau, maybe Portsmouth, maybe, I don't know, one other village. But though this consultation, as I say, go to the guys on the block, do they get to the students in the students to the school? Do they get out there? And how do we engage? You see, because by and large, these are the people that the various political parties attract to vote for them during election, The guy on the block, the young guy there, the person over there. So let's hear from them. And as I said, let's get the work done. It's a lot of work to be done, but I think the challenge, we have to develop the right approach and the right strategy so that we can get the right results in the end.
Yeah. All right, Alvin, thank you very much. It's already 6 minutes past 8 o'clock. Let me apologize to our listeners here for, encroaching in your time. 6 more minutes. We'll be short out of here at least by 10 minutes. But just to see an announcement here, the Wednesday walkers, they are saying that they will be in Wesley, a lot of W's in there. They will be in Wesley on Wednesday of this week. So folks from the Wesley and that general area, the walkers, will be coming your way to do what they do best each and every Wednesday. All right, from 10 o'clock on Wednesday of this week. Folks, that is it for us here in terms of the conversations that we prepared for you guys. We hope that you guys got something or got some things to go with as it pertains to the information dispensed here this evening. I want to thank every one of you who stayed the course with us. And so we just want you guys to be encouraged as you go throughout this week, knowing fully well that your country, my country, it is us for us to build together as a people. And Alvin, any final thoughts?
Well, let me just again thank our many viewers on the various platforms, our committed soldiers, as it were, from all over, as far as France and London and everywhere. And I think we have to continue people on what this whole process is all about, and not just leave it to the politics.
Yeah, Alvin, your internet is cracking up. Your internet is cracking up. So on that note, Alvin, we'll take you out there. Let me see as well on behalf of the Civic Vibes team and the many folks who tuned in to listen to Dr. Pascal read his comments in the first segment. We want to thank him very much for making himself available to come speak to us this afternoon. We learned a lot as we listened to this brother. Very erudite brother. Thank you very much, Dr. Pascal. Let's do this one from Mighty Spider. That one he did some time back. This one will for sure take us down to the wire as we bring this all-important program to a close. Let's take this one.
Nobody to tell me what is going on in my country. Oh, I can see all the confusion, hatred, jealousy, and division. We don't have a sound economy, only hardship, stress, and misery. Those interests no come from no banana. Rosy gone and left us to suffer. I tell you, the Christmas season, 60 apples that were sold in tongue. Day by day, Lord, we keep going down. For that is how we come. All your bananas gone, your cocoa on the ground, still waiting for the vision to come. And to make matters worse, look the apparatus, put a 5% sales tax on us. So we keep going down on the road to Sodom, and the whole country keeps going down slowly. Just look at NBC, banana industry, keeps going down slowly. Dressing red, crying and weeping flat for the dead. I knew this would bring a curse on us. Only concept things can get it worse. Remember the Holy Bible said, Yahweh takes no pleasure in the dead. If you think I just go tomorrow and not believe Thomas, your PRO, he'll tell you that abomination. Now be Sodom, that is how we come. Day by day, Lord, we keep going down. By affection, that is how we come. Though we mourn and we mourn, on the rain, on the sun, yet it's far and far we come. just don't stand a chance. But we keep going down on the road to Sodom, and the whole country keeps going down slowly.
Slowly, slowly.
We going down slowly.
Going down.